Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. All praise and thanks is due to Allah. We praise Allah, we seek assistance and forgiveness from Allah, and we seek refuge in Allah from our lowest selves and from the wrongs that we sometimes commit. Whoever Allah guides, no one can misguide, and whoever Allah leaves astray, no one can guide. And we bear witness that there is none worthy of worship besides Allah, the one who is unique and has no partners. And we bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is Allah's servant and messenger. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم, Allah says in the Holy Quran, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ وختم على سمعه وقلبه وجعل على بصره غشاوة فمن يهده من بعد الله أفلا تذكرون. So Allah says that, have you seen those who make their own desires divine? In Allah's divine knowledge, He subsequently allowed them to stray. He sealed their hearing and their hearts and put a cover on their sights. So who then will guide them after Allah? Don't you then bear this in mind? So I thought that I will talk about negotiations today, because we're currently busy with a documentary around how queer Muslims negotiate this dilemma between the sexuality and the Islam. And we were quite surprised as we did the interviews with people how differently people negotiate this. Some people choose to leave Islam, some people choose to become very religious because they feel guilty and therefore they want to be more religious. Some people choose to come out, some people choose to stay in, and many different other ways. And then it got me reflecting on that our whole life is about negotiations. We constantly negotiate. We negotiate what kind of love partners we want to have. We negotiate what kind of car we want to drive. We negotiate what kind of food we want to eat, what kind of clothes we want to wear, what we want to say, what we don't want to say. The whole life is about negotiations. So as you will observe in the documentary that, as I said, people sometimes will make certain choices and make certain negotiations that ends up that it's not the good or the better negotiation for them in their life. So similarly in our daily life, sometimes we make those negotiations and it's not for our better good or for the betterment of our own lives. And so this is what we want to talk about today, is what lies behind those negotiations. Why do we do those negotiations, yet we know sometimes that they're not good for us? Now, if we look at that example, they call it identity negotiation. In identity negotiation, let's say, for example, you're in a relationship, right? So two people, normally the rule is when two people get into a relationship, there's an agreement. The agreement is either in the form of a contract, or it's not in the form of a contract, but then it's verbal. And then what that goes, it's like signing a contract. When you sign a contract for work, you're subsequently also signing the bylaws that comes with that contract, right? So it's the stuff that's not in the contract, but it's there. So similarly within a relationship, there might be the agreement that you sign, but then there's also the agreements between people. What are the kind of roles that each one in that relationship is going to play? For example, I'll pick up the kids on Friday and you do the cooking, and I'll take the bin out on Tuesdays and stuff like that. Those kind of agreements. And there's more in-depth agreements. Now what happens sometimes, and this is the reason why most relationships fail, is that people do not take agreements seriously. They don't verbalize the agreements. And so when we don't verbalize our agreements, then there's a lot of assumptions. Oh no, he will do that. Oh no, I know she will do that, you know. And then what happens is that we somehow take our partners for granted. Normally we find, and I see this constantly in the counseling room, the one party will give so much in the relationship because there's love that they want back. So they give 100%, and then eventually they are burnt out because they didn't get their 100% back. And the other party will take it for granted because, he's my soul, you know, he will do it. And so because there's no agreement set, that these things happen and we experience burnout. So again, there's an example of how we've negotiated ourselves within the relationship. And it's a negative negotiation because the need was to be loved, and therefore I've given all myself. So you have negotiated yourself in that sense. So in the verse that we quoted in the beginning, Allah says that there is this divine law which will never change. Allah set it up like that, right? And this divine law was set up to keep the balance. So in order for us to live healthy lives, we have to make healthy choices. We have to make healthy negotiations. And these negotiations that we make shouldn't run contrary to universal laws. Otherwise, it would be as if you've taken your own desires, as Allah says, as divine law, you know? Sometimes when that will comes up, that naf comes up, I want to do this now. I feel like I want to do this now. There's not a conscious process that happens where you think that, how is this going to affect my life? What I'm about to do, how is it going to affect my life? Are there good consequences to it, or what are the negative consequences of that? But as human beings, we sometimes don't allow ourselves that gap to think about what are the consequences of our negotiations. So Allah said that when you do this, following your own desires, He will grant it to you. So whatever you want, you'll find that you'll get it, right? And He'll make it so possible for you that He'll seal off your eyesight, and He'll seal off your heart, and He'll seal off your hearing so that you don't get distracted and you finally get what you want. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to face the consequences of that decision. And then Allah says there is no other system other than the universal law. So Allah says there's no other system than Allah. So nothing else besides this that will be able to help you. So basically what it says is that there is the universal laws. If you're trying to find a court patching, you know, there is no court patching. You either follow the universal laws or you face the consequences of your choices. So basically you will lost cause if you just follow your own desires without considering the consequences. And then Allah asks us to reflect upon this and to remember this, because it's a rule for us for our lives in order to create happiness and balance within our lives. Because negotiations is something that we constantly do, and if we do not reflect upon it before we negotiate, we may end up following our own desires. So let's come again back to the relationship, which is a very practical thing. So the universal law is that when two people get into an agreement, the agreement needs to be clear to both parties, right, before they sign. And as I said, when you sign, you also sign the bylaws that goes with the agreement. So when two people have a commitment to each other, but there were no agreements, each one just follows their own heart's desires, without consultation for one another. And then you're going to get yourself what you deserve. It's either an argument, and sometimes it's a fight, and sometimes it's a divorce, and sometimes you end up in depression. Right? So it's not Allah that says to you, these are the laws and you must follow it, and if you don't going to follow it, you're going to be punished. We can see that by not following those rules, there are consequences that lead to your own unhappiness, your own depression. Right? So the point I'm trying to get to is that when we negotiate, we need to be very clear what we're negotiating, and that our negotiations is not self-serving. For example, in the relationship, it's not about you when you're in the relationship. It's about the two of you. And it's about the agreement between the two of you, right? Otherwise, you're not in a relationship. You're in a relationship with yourself then. That our negotiations is not a manipulation of the situation or a manipulation of people in order to get, sometimes we do things because we don't want to get hurt, or we don't want to lose, or we don't want to look like an idiot. So we do certain negotiations, that is self-serving. So now this begs the question again when we ask about our sexual orientation. We all know that by now that sexual orientation is not something that's ever going to change. Psychologists have even given up in 1974 already. It's not a diagnosis anymore because you can't change sexual orientation. So either you're going to accept it or you're going to live in denial. So you have to accept sexual orientation. But your religion or your culture or your conservative society that you're coming from says to you it's wrong. So in order to please that society or that community or your parents or your imam or your religion, you start negotiating. You negotiate like, okay, so I'm not going to come out, or I'm just going to tell him, I'm just going to come out to him, but I'm not going to come out to the community. Or when you really want that relationship that you want, it's going to have to be duck and dive. You can't tell people that you are in this relationship. So again, you negotiate. And again, I see this in my counseling room, is that people come with the pain, the consequences of that negotiation. They're either depressed or they, considering whether they should choose between religion and sexuality. It's also because of the kind of negotiations that we've made. So when we do this is such a harmful negotiation, because you can see the clear effects that it has on your personal life. So the universal law is that you're going to be gay, you should be gay, you were created to be gay. And so going contrary to that and following your own desires by wanting to please other people, it's actually going against the grain of what Allah has created. But society tells us the reverse. No, you're supposed to be straight. And that is what Allah has created, and therefore you're experiencing the consequences of your choices. So it is true that life is about choices, and humanity should be free to make their own choices. Absolutely. We believe in freedom, and we believe in freedom of choice. But the conscious person is the one who makes sure that his freedoms and his choices that he has been given does not have a negative effect on them, on the people that they share their lives with, or on the environment that they find themselves in. For example, if you choose to take drugs, for example, did you make a conscious choice about that? Did you look at the consequences of that? If you choose, for example, to sleep with somebody, it's just a one-night stand, it's a quickie. What are the consequences of that action, right? How is it going to affect you spiritually? How does it affect your self-preservation, your image, your relationship that you maybe already have, and cheating on the partner? And how does it help you in your personal growth? So those kind of questions sometimes we don't ask because we just want to have the quickie. So again, it is important to make choices that are not self-serving or that are not fulfilling the need of the moment, because our actions, as we can see, does have consequences. And the sad part is that at some point the universe will force you to come back and to deal with it. So you're going to have to deal with it anyway. So why don't you rather just make the right choice at the right moment when you are called to make that choice? So to avoid yourself from unwanted agony, rather negotiate consciously and choose what is right, not what you think will suit you at a particular time. Allah says in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسهم وللوالدين أو الأقربين. So Allah says, oh, you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witness to Allah, even if it be against yourself, or against your parents, or against your family, your kin, verily Allah is well acquainted with all that you do. So here Allah reminds us that when we make those kind of negotiations, and we know deep down inside it's not a good negotiation, but we still want to do it, then we are being unjust to ourselves. Or when we play the game with society, I'm not going to tell society that I'm gay, or I'm not going to do this, because you want to avoid hurt and all of that. It's a negotiation, and then we are doing an injustice also to society. Because if we're not standing up, for example, for I'm sounding like an activist, but if we're not standing up for ourselves as being who we are, we're also not helping a community that doesn't understand what it is to be homosexual. We're not helping them to understand us. So then that again also is an injustice towards others. And again Allah reminds us of the nafs, of our own desires, and how sometimes our own desires can become the divine for us, and through that making our mistakes. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'anil Kareem wa nafa'na iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikril hakim innahu jawadun malikun barrun rabbur rahim. May Allah bless me and you through the guidance of this noble Quran, and may its teachings and remembrances benefit me and you. Truly Allah is the possessor of wealth, the sovereign, the all-good, the one who has authority over us, the all-loving, the all-merciful. Then Allah says also in the Quran, أَفَسِحْرٌ هَذَا أَمْ أَنْتُمْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Allah says, is this sorcery or infatuation, or is it just that you don't see it? Right? So basically again what Allah says, although this comes from a particular story, but the bottom line is that sometimes, like come again to relationships, sometimes you yearn as a gay person, for example, you yearn to have that relationship. And now somebody comes and show a particular interest, and nou is jy sommer verlief nou. And it's not sommer, oh, this is a wonderful person, and he promised me this, and it's sommer gesê gaan afkom en hy gaan trou met my en almal die dinge, because we're yearning for that, right? But we're negotiating ourselves again, and if you look deep down inside, you know it's not true. You know relationship doesn't start off that way. You start off with friendship, then you get to know each other, and then you question whether this is the person you want to settle with, and then miskien 3 years down the line, and then you decide, nou gaan ek trou, And so Allah asked, like, do you not see? Like, you know the signs, but we're still fooling ourselves for that. Then Allah also says, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَا تُبْصِرُونَ. I swear by what I witness in what you see. And then Allah says, وَمَا لَا تُبْصِرُونَ, and what you don't see. So Allah is basically saying that you maybe can fool yourself, but you can't fool Allah, because I'm witness to what I know you're seeing and what you don't see. And then Allah says, مَا كَذَّبَ الْفُؤَادُ مَا رَأَى. And the heart cannot lie about that which it sees, right? So you know in your heart, the heart cannot lie, you know in your heart, this doesn't feel right. I don't know, but you would tell people something different, because it's something that your heart desires. And then Allah says, وَلَا تَكِفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Allah says, and don't follow that which you have no knowledge about. For every act of hearing and seeing and feeling in the heart will have to be held accountable. Right? So it's a way of helping us to live as conscious beings, right? Not to just respond to feelings and desires, but to really think, Whatever I'm bringing into my space, is it good for me? Is it going to grow me? What are the consequences of that before you make the action? Because at some point, whether it is the day of Qiyamah or whether it is in this world, you are going to be called to be accountable for something. Now let's say, for example, nou jy die oudjie gemeet nou en jy sommer op verlief en whatever, and you're telling the whole world about this now, and tomorrow it doesn't work out. Now you must face it, you know. Clear it up now, you know. So eventually it comes back to you and you have to deal with it. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد اللهم انصر المجاهدين في كل مكان اللهم يسر ولا تعسر اللهم تمم بالخير وأنت الكريم ميسر. Oh Allah, assist those who assist the cause of Muhammad. Oh Allah, assist all those who strive towards good in every place. Oh Allah, make things easy for us and remove difficulty from us. And oh Allah, complete us in goodness, for truly you are the most noble of those who provide assistance. ربنا لا تجعلنا فتنة لقوم الظالمين ونجينا برحمتك من القوم الكافرين. And O our sustainer, do not let us be a trial to those who are misguided, and give us victory by your mercy over those who deny the truth. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وصحبه وسلم. Truly Allah and the angels sends blessings and salutations on the Prophet Muhammad, so all you really send your greetings and salutations upon him. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. And the final word and is that all praise and thanks is due to Allah, the authority over all creation. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون واذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. And O servants of Allah, may Allah's mercy be upon you. Allah instructs you to serve with justice and with good conduct, and to see to the needs of your loved ones. And He forbids you from shameful deeds and from misconduct that leads to wrongdoing and oppression. And He cautions you so that you may take heed. So remember Allah, and Allah will remember you. And ask of Allah, and Allah will respond to you. And indeed, in the remembrance of Allah is the greatest thing. And Allah is well aware of what we do. So let us stand for prayer.